one of our volunteers came up to me and she says, Hank, I've got to make a life and death decision about my mother by Thursday. And she starts to cry as she's telling me this. I said, well, come on, sit down, tell me what's going on. So we found a place for some privacy, and I said, well, what's going on? And she says, well, my mom is in a hospital down in Virginia Beach, and she's on dialysis. And my brothers and sisters and I have to decide whether to take her in a nursing home one time, and there were residents and family members of the nursing home. And I mentioned about nursing home residents not surviving CPR. They just don't. And a daughter of one of the residents raised her hand. She said, I got a question for you. The people living out in the community of the same age as the ones living in the nursing home, do more of those living in the community survive CPR than those living in a nursing home? I said, yes, research has shown that if you live in the community and you get CPR, more of those people are going to likely survive than the ones living in a nursing home. She says, I knew it. They get worse care in this nursing home. And I said, no, wait a minute. Why the nursing home? You know, it's not like, where shall mom go to live now that she's so disabled? Shall she just stay by herself in the Hilton Hotel or the nursing home? The Hilton, the nursing home. I mean, people are in nursing homes and assisted living because their health has declined. It used to always bug me as a nursing home chaplain when people would say, you know, ever since we brought mom in here, she's gone downhill. And I would say to them, well, why'd you bring her in? Well, she was going downhill. I mean, sadly, the trajectory at the end of life is a slow, sometimes faster decline. Occasionally some plateaus, but really you don't ever get that much better as you get worse and worse. A lot of times what we say, because of patient autonomy, if they want to have CPR, then we will give it to them because of autonomy. Well, what kind of autonomy is that? When you're offering a treatment that won't work. Is this really autonomy? Is it really an autonomous decision? Like, that's more of a philosophical question for you to want to consider. I know it's very difficult to write a policy, of what we call futility policy. That is, we can withhold CPR from people knowing it won't work. And institutions really shy away from doing that. So I don't want to get into that discussion. If the patient and the family are requesting CPR when there's no reasonable medical benefit, then find out the core issues and address them, which I did address. Lastly, do not resuscitate or no CPR does not mean do not care. And a lot of times people will say, and I've had families say this to me, you know, when mom's dying, you're going to do nothing? You're just going to let her die? And I said, oh no, we do lots for dying patients. You know, we keep them clean and dry and turn. If they need pain, they'll get pain medication. If they're having a hard time breathing, they can get oxygen. They'll clear their airway. You can come in and sit with them. You can get them in bed with them and hold them. There are lots we do for dying patients. So, in the same conversation that we talk about do not resuscitate order, we talk about all we will do. Put it in the positive sense, as well as what we won't do. I had a hospice patient once. He had throat cancer, and for a long, I can't remember how long he had the feeding tube, because I had treatment, successful treatment of throat cancer at one point. But he had a feeding tube, and every day nurse's aide would come and get him out of bed, set him up in his kitchen, had a tray table there next to his counter, had the TV, had his books, had several cans of Ensure. The nurse's aide would leave, and a couple times a day he'd pop a can of Ensure and pour it into his feeding tube. I asked him one time, I says, how do you feel about being fed with this feeding tube? He says, it's great. I said, really? He says, yeah. He says, you know, I don't have any pots and pans to wash. I don't have to go grocery shopping. And I get to stay in my own home. So I just want to be clear. I want you to know that I know feeding tubes can be beneficial. If I had the same situation, I'd take a feeding tube in a minute if I had throat cancer and couldn't swallow. Because I know you can have a very good quality of life even though you have a feeding tube.